Alrighty. Well, there's certain things I have to do, like the pharmaceutical psychiatric evidence that I'm documenting, bringing forth historic abuse and mistreatment of majoritively Scottish, Irish, lower economic English, descendants of convicts, descendants of immigrants, all these things to perpetuate this socialist communist government formation over the last 40 years in cahoots with a private health insurance Ponzi scheme. I have to be really technical of that. I have to be really careful, right? Because that has nothing to do with my identity. The abuse on that begun based on my mother's exposure to the abuse, which is all racism is. If you go to England in the 1600s, whatever, or even now, you go there now, right? Scottish people in England are openly abused by certain classes. I think it's just across the board. Openly discriminated against. This is like, you can walk there in, 3 days? I don't know how long it takes. It's been a while since I've done that walk. Okay, so this is racism. We, on Federation, already had our own racial situation going on within the cohort that would be described by Muslims, immigrant, Indian, Middle Eastern Muslims, as racism. Yeah, we've got our own racism. So do you. Pretty sure some of the largest conflicts in the world are going on between two sects of the Muslim faith. So what's going on? There is a dark-skinned cohort coming here and playing victims and throwing a fucking term around called racism. Well, Scottish people have been racially discriminated, provably, for over 100 years in this country and in the country that we've all come from. A lot of individuals hold this conflict within their own blood, and we're trying to sort that out. We're trying to sort out our country here, which is 125 years old, officially, the federal government of Australia. It's not a be-all, end-all strategy to mention racism. Historic racism, again, within the cohort that you would describe as colonizers within your delusional rhetoric, while shielding the world from the actual true atrocities of what your faith is doing around the world. I'm pretty sure that the conversation between the Jewish faith and the Muslim faith and the Islamic world has been on every fucking media station, every night on the news, every fucking day in the streets, disrupting by their own things. Yeah, we're disrupting. Disruptive beyond all fucking measure in this country that didn't really officially have any acceptable thing of either of those faiths. Was India still fucking under colonization at the time of Federation? Racism isn't something that you can point at somebody else, claim virtuosity in yourself, and say they're racist. That doesn't exist. That's absurd. The reason that British India was divided into two regions, Pakistan and fucking India, was because of Indian racism between the Hindus and the fucking Muslims. You do not get to come here and throw that fucking R, the word that starts with R, around as if you're the fucking, what's Gandhi, fucking manifest in our fucking Senate. Using an old-fashioned trope. Was that what was said by the Indian Muslim fucking senator? What is this old-fashioned? We're dealing with old conflicts. I'm pretty sure wearing a symbolic representation of like female servitude is a whole lot less old-fashioned than, I don't know, hang gliding in and burning people alive. Australia is not the fucking soapbox that every fucking region around the world that has historic grievances towards the British Empire get to come and fucking sort of spurt their bullshit whilst restricting the actual, like, reformation, the actual injustices of our historic development as a country, which is what I'm trying to do. I am telling you, there was open, massive discrimination between the governance in this country and the pioneering Celtic families from Ireland, from both parts of Ireland, Northern, Southern Ireland, from Scotland, and from lower economic regions, regional areas of England. Whilst there was the stolen generation going on to Aboriginals, there was the stolen generation light going on to these individuals. The individuals that put everything on the line, brought their own resources. In a lot of cases, these weren't all convicts. These were like well established, financially secure, like religious, good, like well-behaved, well-adapted families that just by their happenance to land here in a hotbed of discrimination, of white on white discrimination, a lot of times being projected from regions in the United States of America, which was having its heyday. This is very, 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 very complicated. You couldn't get a better representation for the Scottish or the Celtic, people of the world than Pauline Hanson putting a burqa on. The women of Scotland have been massively discriminated, massively abused, systemically abused on an industrial scale for a very, very long time. Pauline Hanson standing in there, using her full expression to express her concern of a very historic, in a recently imported cohort of women suffering the same thing, is not resorting to something old-fashioned and racist. She's addressing from lived experience. And this is the problem. We're constantly told that there is a white problem in this. There's what is it? White nationalist, white supremacist culture going on. No, there isn't. There is no more a white supremacist culture than there is a fucking Pakistan-Indian alliance. What is it? Every couple of months there's a fucking war that breaks up on that border. We don't have those borders here. We have history. A lot of it buried in shallow graves in industrial and religious, like, persecution. And I think there's the example of the stolen, like, and adopted out children to women that had children out of wedlock. We're sorting out our own fucking issues. We don't need some fucking umpires that have come and escaped from some of the worst fucking places on earth to blow the whistle on our democratic fucking strategies for how we're dealing with the last 125 years of mistakes, of exposure, of truth-telling. We are leading the charge in the truth-telling of our own misdeeds. on an ever-increasing basis, this Muslim religion is seen to not be anything of the sort. It is an invasionary concept. It is a single-minded invasionary concept. It will use whatever it can. Within our culture, white culture as you would call it, you know, we've got all types of fucking devices that have been used against women. You know, nagging women used to have their heads put in these fucking cages, or they'd be dunked in the water, or they'd be called witches and persecuted. This is our history. Our history, which is what this country was established under. We have a good track record of exposing our mistakes, rectifying them, and making solutions. This is a continuation of our culture. This is a continuation of our country. To walk in and claim it as racism, when the faith you represent is responsible for atrocities across the globe in recent years, is responsible for perpetuating the most destructive forms of racism, is literally making up 26% of the population and constantly attacking tiny little minorities. See, the problem is like the Muslim population of Australia has been steadily increasing. But there hasn't been a true telling of what's going on in the Muslim faith. It's like you've been let in and you were a minority and you started acting as minorities do. You know, oh, we're getting, and I'm not going to claim that you weren't subject to racism. You were. So was every other region. And no one's safe from it. It's like I say, the Scottish, lower economic English, you know, Irish, Catholics, Italians, Vietnamese, all subject to racial discrimination. So what does this leave? Oh, well, according to the immigrant Bible, that just leaves the aristocracy of England. Does it? Oh, the aristocracy of England isn't openly discriminated against in Australia? There is an open racism against the aristocracy of England? There isn't a perpetuation of false tellings of what actually that means? No one in this country is immune to racial discrimination. But the only people, or the main people, like if I came out here and said my argument, I've been racially discriminated to as a descendant of the aristocracy of England, I'd be laughed out of every single fucking room, no matter whether that was true or not. And I can guarantee you that that cohort makes up a far smaller population than the Muslim world. So the true story that's coming out, that's emerging in the shadows and in you know in the subtext of what's happening right now in Australia, is that there is an attempted colonization by the Islamic faith into this country. Very much like there was a successful colonization of this country by the Protestant people coming from England. But we had a king. We had a patriarchal structure. You have one as well. That's why you put your stupid fucking cunts in those fucking things in the first place. Or are they the fucking masterminds from behind the thing? That would be clever, isn't it? So what's that? The the radical Islamic faith is actually a feminist, liberation movement, and that's how they do it. They hide in there. It's the ultimate. They're the puppet masters of the Islamic world. You never think of it, do you? They're just shipped around. They're brought to other places. They're dragged out. You can't see them at the shop, but actually, they've got fucking iPads in there, and they're masterminding the Islamic invasion of the Western world. If I walked into the Senate and I brought in a historic representation of the abuse techniques and tactics, including the dunking and the cage and the gags and all these things, and the burning at the stake, and I said, this is representation of historic abuse onto females within Western culture, within my culture, and these are how we make amends for it, and this is what I'm identifying as a new pharmaceutical psychiatric method that has been inflicted onto my mother that has Scottish and Irish descent and was a pioneering family over here in Western Australia. You also served for the Defence Force and also worked in the tracking station in NASA, which is probably where she got headhunted from for this. Because the beginning of this wasn't abuse. That's why my mother fucking doesn't act like someone who's abused. It's worked out very well for her. It's an intergenerational discriminatory tool for cultural genocide. Now, if I brought in a photo of a woman getting dunked in a thing, is that a prop? Is that an old-fashioned technique? If I was in a courtroom and I say, this is a woman getting dunked for nagging, and this is a woman getting electroshock therapy for fucking complaining about something. This is a woman getting a lifelong diagnosis and then instructed to inflict that diagnosis onto her children and grandchildren thing to destroy her culture. This is the example of the women from Scottish, Celtic, Irish, English descent in this country being promoted to homogenize their cultures into Kmart and Target. Clothing, footwear, education. At what point, and this is to all Muslim, Indian, Middle Eastern, whatever, members of our parliament, at what point do I get to attempt to, correct the injustices of the last 125 years? Why, when I am a victim of this within our country? See, what's happening is there is constant racially based, religious, extremist based wars going on in the places that you've fled from. You've come here. We have that going on here. But you're stealing all the oxygen out of the room. You're taking all the spotlight. I don't have 20,000 victims of psychiatric abuse and racial and white on white racial discrimination to carry signs across the Sydney Harbour Bridge. Why? Because they're all still fucking traumatized, or they're half in and half out. Their parents have fully succumbed to it. In my case, there's a sibling conflict down the line. This is all going on within families. See, the racial discrimination and abuse that's been enacted onto my people was really, really effective. Probably about as effective as putting burqas on women and then getting them to protect that. Well, we want to protect our burqas. That's our religion, don't you know? If I don't support it, I get punched in the face by my husband and rocks thrown at me in the street. So I support the wearing of my burqa. So based on my precedent of being a next generation, liberator and exposer of my mother's abuse as an Australian, what am I doing? Well, I'm clearing the road for the next generation of Muslim Australians that are going to do the same. There is going to be a Muslim Australian pushback onto the extreme Islamic world. And it's going to take place like this. Oh, I didn't like watching my mum be put in a fucking thing and basically be a slave and punched and abused, and that being ignored by the police and by the judicial system and by the government because they're afraid of religious extremist retaliation. Now, here's the thing. Why does it take so long, so much work for me to do this? Because they're not worried about me religiously, extremistly retaliating. Isn't that a fucking crazy way to run a country? You know, it's the ultimate thing. It's like the coercive control, the abuse thing. It's like, this is the next step. It's like, yeah, you address this, but you do it racially. You continuously throw the word racist around. And as long as the select cohort of culturally relevant coercive control and abuse is protected, is untouchable. There was a time when dunking women, if you criticise that, you'd be called a witch. If you tried to like openly speak about how women should be able to speak, you'd be called like a fucking, you'd be like discriminated out of the room. I can't understand. It's like the women being forced to wear these garb are not able to do almost anything. Yet you will rise to the top of our political system to defend that practice whilst not living under its effect, clearly. See, the problem, I think, with the Islamic and the Muslim cohort is that it really has nothing to do with that. It is a conquering ideology. It takes all different forms, but it is singly minded. In how else could you have these things? Be in the same room. Within our culture, the women that are, that are liberating themselves from devices like the dunking machine or being called witches or doing whatever, that's Pauline Hanson. She's been a lifelong politician in a free and open democracy. Is very outspoken. Very outspoken. Like that was non-existent 150 years ago in our culture. 200 years ago in our culture. Didn't exist. Now it does. She's the example. She is our Joan of Arc. And you come in and try and burn our Joan of Arc on your Islamic fucking stake that you've been allowed to temporarily and optically remove the restrictions that enslaves the other women, so that you can come and defend the practice. And you try and burn our Joan of Arc in the parliament that my family helped establish. I've just about had a fucking enough of this shit. I think it's time to recolonize this country. I think it's time to re-ghettoize this country. I think it's time for the Protestant fucking faith of this country, or the descendants of the people that came here under that example, to start acting like the Muslims do in their little suburbs. Do not fucking come into any fucking suburb that you're not fucking obviously welcome in. Anyone who doesn't declare outright war on the Muslim faith is a fucking heretic, and we will hunt them and kill them in the streets. Any man who doesn't enforce his wife or his daughter to follow this and to hate Muslims is a heretic and will be stoned in the streets. The official uniform of this thing is a red fucking coat made of wool. And we will patrol every zone of this fucking country to make sure that no Muslims come into it. We're pushing you back. We're pushing you back into the fucking ports and the cities that you've arrived in, and you will fucking stay there until you can learn the customs and appropriately implant yourself in the appropriate time. You will not obstruct our healthy regulation of our past misdeeds by dragging your international and never-ending racism and discrimination into our country. If we are not allowed to correct the injustices that we've done on ourselves as white people, then what chance do we have to make any difference to the people that, by the actions of the Islamic faith internationally, are being tortured, mutilated, enslaved, raped, abused? Our first priority in this country is to sort out our own mess, our own messes here in this country. The Islamic faith, the Muslim faith is not how you enter Parliament House. You enter as an Australian. You speak about Australia's issues and concerns. You acclimatise, you familiarise yourself with our history. There isn't a front of the bulldozer strategy where you're at the cutting edge of the virtue fucking culture. No. We have 125 years of cultural injustice that we need to, begin understanding and making amends for. Unless there is an event like a mosque burning down or a terrorist attack or something like this, or, like high-level terrorism or something like that, which we've already had to, deflect from Iran, this shouldn't be being brought to the tip of the argument in the Senate. See, the problem is when discrimination, when racial abuse is industrialized and is socialized within our own government systems, it takes a long time for that to be seen. This is that moment. We're discovering it. It's there. Now, the problem is that the fairy tale of the immigrants in this country is that the white man, look, it's not even a fairy tale. This is the Aboriginal story, completely relevant because they're black. They're black Aboriginals. So their story is, we were black Aboriginals, we were doing just fine, bunch of white fellas came, then a lot of us dead. That's it. Okay. I'm not trying to lower the value of that argument. That's completely the truth. But there is no such thing as a globalist united white fella association. There is nothing anywhere near it. And Aboriginal Australians were not Muslims. The most destructive thing to the Aboriginal people, and this is someone who's openly, supporting the Catholic Church and the Church of England and the Christian faith, the most destructive ideology onto the Aboriginal people of Australia was Christianity. And we're not going to have a competition here for who can fuck the Aboriginal people worse, the Christians or the Muslims. We're making amends for our mistakes. Our country was established under the Protestant faith, and so that is what we are making amends on. The percentages of Protestant or Catholic Christians in the world that have dark skin is a lot lower than the percentage of Muslims that have dark skin. So we are protecting the Aboriginal people from an Islamic invasion. That is our job. No one is going to mistake Pauline Hanson if she walks out into the Australian bush as an Aboriginal. I don't know how many generations it's going to take for the Hanson descendants to appear Aboriginal, but I will guarantee you that it is going to happen. Racism is, funnily enough, the reason we are having this explosion of this term that is being used. It's used all the time. It's just constantly racism. The only reason that word fucking exists is because of the British Empire's acceptance of our misdeeds and our attempts to correct and make amends for that, including shutting down the African slave trade, which cost the United Kingdom like billions of dollars. We only just finished paying that off. Before that, there was no such thing as racism. The Islamic faith has been a conquering force for 1,500 years. That's number one tool is assimilation. It's assimilation of dark-skinned people under one faith, under a faith of a conquering warlord. We can see what's happening in Africa right now as this Islamic extremist cult is instructing those tribal African men on how to genocide weaker and more naturalized tribal opponents. There is no person really in Australia, there shouldn't be, any person in Australia who doesn't know who Mahatma Gandhi was. But I instruct you right now to not make the mistake of thinking that because, one, Pauline Hanson is a woman, two, because she's outspoken, something that we've fought for the freedoms of within our culture, and three, that she has glorious red hair, that she's not acting in the same way that Mahatma Gandhi was. We are a complicated collection of countries, of identities, of tribal groups, of racial groups. It is really almost impossible to have an accurate telling of what exactly it was that the British Empire actually was. It was a combination. It was a structure of royalty, of monarchy, of a lot of times corporations and militaries and navies and expansion and science and bureaucracy and politics and all these things combined. And one thing it really was a meritocracy. Now I'm 36 minutes in to that, and that's the word I'm going to end on, a meritocracy. The number one tool that has been used to destroy the concept of a meritocracy in this country and a lot of other countries by design is this diversity and equity, whatever, DEI concept that has been commercialized, reinforced by corporate mandate, and then rejected because it doesn't work. Dragging the word racism into conversation is not meritocracy. It's racism. Sometimes there's a Freudian slip in language when people trying to do, protect these things. Oh, this is racism, racism. There's a few things that Pauline Hanson's discussing when, visually by putting a burqa on. There's women's abuse of women, enslavement of women, and mistreatment of women, coercive control. I'd say putting a fucking, pillowcase on a fucking woman. I won't do it now because it's a gimmick. Putting a pillowcase on a woman's head and making sure that you she's basically acts as your own property. That's coercive control. That's like environmental design coercive control. It's very up there, right? So she's doing that. She's addressing security concerns because you cannot see who the person is. And as I said, you can't see whether they're controlling the world and the Islamic invasion of the Western world with an iPad. You can't see it. You can't see facial expressions. You can't see body language as well. You can't actually confirm that it is the person. Like, no one can actually confirm to me. And I think the funniest thing of all would be if there's some behind-the-scenes footage of Pauline Hanson replacing herself with someone else. I almost guarantee that's what happened. Were those Pauline Hanson's legs? Ooh. Wouldn't that be some genius level meritocracy there? To put an absolute fucking display on for the Senate by allowing some unknown woman to walk in with a burqa and then get falsely accused of being Pauline Hanson. Who knows? So there's that. There's identity. In an environment politically where we're constantly talking about the dangers of identity and digital identity, it seems like a pretty big loophole to be able to just stick a fucking scarf over your head. Being that we're a new country now, we're a new concept, we're Australia, we're the Protestant-formed Australian federal government, I'd say that, that's pretty ambitious. Muhammad, he did some things, but I'd say the founders of Australia, the first part, Captain Cook maybe even, I'd say that's a pretty big thing. It's we just all wear Darth Vader masks. Now that's our religious garb, and the men wear it so that you can't, so that our women are protected from the prying eyes of immigrant women who wish to, steal us away. So we all wear Darth Vader masks. That's, our religious freedom. Am I allowed to wear a Darth Vader mask in Parliament House, in the Senate? They always talk about the Senate in Star Wars. All the time. It's not even a leap. Are Islamic women in the Taliban regions, are they allowed to vote? Do they even have elections? You see the absurdity of this? You see the absurdity of dragging the word racism into a place of conversation? It ends the conversation. And it's racist. The argument isn't about race, because the Islamic faith, especially extremist faith, it's not a race, it's a religion, it's an ideology, it's a concept. It's not a race, so it's not racism. If she dressed up as a witch, would that be racist? Yes. Using the same concepts that you're speaking about. If she dressed up as a witch, she'd be being racist. These conversations are what is meant to be happening. And there's a reason it's all women. It's because men can't have these conversations in the environment that's been created. By men. Men built that. They've been pushed out. They've been discriminated against. And now, in an absolute show of disgrace, they've kicked out our version of Joan of Arc or Mahatma Gandhi by a cohort of women purporting to defend the racial rights of Islamic extremist prisoners. See, it just keeps going. You just keep pushing into that argument. It's like, what would it take? Well, it would take an Islamic woman who on a daily basis wears a burqa in her day-to-day life to be in the Senate, to defend the rights of her whatever. But how would we identify her until she took it off? So you'll see that the burqa and the ideology surrounding it is not compatible with an open and equal parliamentary process and country. It isn't, because these are important. How do we identify her? How do we identify that she's speaking of her own free will? Especially in the days of this technology, she could take a tape recorder in there and just go like this, so that you see the fabric moving. She could have explosives, strapped to her and an earpiece in. That's the Taliban telling her what to do. See, in our culture, all of these things are really important. Facial movements, hand gestures, the way your mouth moves, like hesitation. All of these are vital for a healthy and accurate parliamentary process, which is what the Senate is. It's getting just too absurd, right? And the real problem is I don't see this same strategy taking place in the worst affected zones that are being, devastated by extremist Islamic cults around the world. Maybe if this was going, if Gaza, if I could watch Hamas, have a woman in there saying that, oh, we've got this Jewish lady who says that we shouldn't think, and that's not happening. So why is it happening here when, as I said, historic discrimination, abuse, cultural genocide, attacks on femininity, traditional, destruction of traditional belief systems and all these things. Do you know like our socialized industrial mainstream medical industry is a racist cultural attack on traditional concepts. And it's just getting very hard. It's like, we'll support, the Aboriginal people eat bush tucker and it's better for them and they do these medicinal things and, they would use these things to invoke spirits and this is this. Yet we're still living in a socialized healthcare system that is openly and racially discriminating, multi-generations of clearly individual, unique cultural identities that are being squished into one big pile by these Islamic proponents that have been let off their leash long enough to fill our minds with propaganda. There is no boogeyman. There's no Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. There's no devil that needs to be killed. There's no demon. There's no racial conspiracy. There's just observation and dedication to uncover exactly what's going on. Pauline Hanson, in my observation, in my thing, is just participating in the cultural tradition that was brought here from Westminster and established here in 1901 on federation. That's what she's doing. In 1901, it would have been unthinkable to have a woman, let alone a red-headed woman, let alone from a class that she emerged from, taking place in that activity. Let's start telling that story properly. Let's start telling that story accurately. And then let's send that message internationally and continue on our work that we do here in our Senate and in our Parliament. I will not have this virtue signaling, like, just DEI trend following cohort of morons pollute the waters that we are trying to clear. This is what's expected. If you're not cut up for it, if your ideology, can't be morphed and mutilated to actually do the job that the Senate is supposed to do, then get out of the Senate. You have volunteered under false pretenses. You have given a false and a fraudulent reason and explanation for your, attempted entrance into that building, into our structure. It's not intended to chit chat about the hot topics of the Twitterverse. Its purpose is to run the country, is to govern the country, and to take admission from all regions and all time periods. We're not going to solve the conflict between the Islamic world and the Christian world, or the Islamic world and the Jewish faith, by having two women argue about it and play dress-ups. I'd send a clear message that there will be some pretty heavy retaliatory measures taken if Senator Hanson is not readmitted and allowed to wear whatever she wants, including a long blonde wig, to rub it all back in your faces of exactly how exposed you are for this fucking racist, mob-based, cult, populist delusion that you have dragged in. If these things can't be sorted out, if we can't, get back to appropriate governance of our country, appropriate political discourse in this country, then we're really going to have to start getting back and looking at maybe the protests against women entering our political system were just. Maybe they had something right there. I don't see anything but gossip and fucking hearsay and small talk and bullshit going on there. It's not what it's intended for. Especially at the early days of a country so large and so complicated as Australia. If you've entered that house because you think it looks good on your resume, or you know what I mean? Or you know that it's going to lead you into some type of corporate career and you get a nice salary and all this, like, that's not what it's for. Anyway. I don't have really much to say as closing statements. I've got 8 minutes left, so I'll read 5 English words that I can project towards the Senate today as they think about what they've done and maybe prepare to make amends for that. Quartz. One of the most commonest minerals, silicon dioxide, having many varieties which differ in color and luster, occurring in crystals, rock crystal, amethyst, citrine, a massive agate, bloodstone, jasper, an important constituent of many rocks, and is cut into wafers and used to control the frequencies of radio transmitters. Devon. A breed of dairy and beef cattle originally from Devonshire. Large, smooth, bland sausage, sliced thin and eaten cold. That's polony. Or bologna, or what was it? Devon. Yeah, Devon as well. Yeah. Quartz Devon. The Devon's like a collection of unknown meats all pushed into a sausage and then I can see a little storyline emerging here. Slighting. Derogatory, disparaging, slighting. Cleaner. One who that which cleans, an apparatus preparation for cleaning. Well, the cleaners have arrived, so I'd like you all to leave the Senate thing this morning while we clean and get this racist DEI bullshit out of here so that you can all get back tomorrow and play properly. And everyone's allowed in there, including Pauline. You're not going to ostracize her. You're not going to mob up against her like a fucking tribe of street kids. Security. Security has arrived. And is returning order. Otherwise, we're going to have to, take some measures into our own hands and send some, more elevated messages. Freedom from danger, risk, safety. Freedom from care, apprehension, on doubt, confidence. Something that secures and makes safe. A protection, a defense. See, the problem is that when the Muslims of the world, which make up 26% of the population, openly in our Senate discriminate and attack a red-headed woman, well, if the red-headed population makes up 2%, then that means that the red-headed female population is 1%. So you are setting 13% of the population to aggressively discriminate against red-headed Australian women. Red-headed Australian women? God damn it. That must be like, of the world population, I don't know. Who knows of the Australian population? You know, and considering my girlfriend has red hair. In the words of Greta Thunberg, how dare you? How dare you? You open up our fucking history books if you fucking, if you want to speak in our Senate. You understand our history that we've politically achieved through our parliamentary system before you bring a word which is a bludgeoning tool. You bring the word racism inappropriately into our parliament system. You may as well have fucking set off an explosion in there. You may as well have strapped fucking dynamite to yourself, walked in there and exploded it. And what do I use as precedent? Well, I'm pretty sure that the extreme puritanical pilgrims that enacted the witch trials in Salem in the United States of America, I'm pretty sure that they would have described the witches' activity as racist against their extreme Protestant puritanical cult, if the word existed at that time, because they were culturally acting differently. That's race. That's what you're doing. So you've unified the term racist to in-group individuals that purport to be non-racist. So you've created a segment of the world and then filtered them, because there's constant perpetuation of this. Are you racist? No, of course not. No, I'm not racist. Of course not. So anyone who acts racist is actually the minority. Everyone's racist. Everyone. That's it. That's why it's a non-issue. If I have to go and do candid camera across the fucking country, exposing these leftist liberal fucking morons as being more than likely the most racist people in the country, and then claiming to be non-fucking racist and perpetually bringing that into the fucking argument, it doesn't work. It's stupid. Use more words. Get one of these. I know that English is maybe your second language. See that? Racist joke. How do I fucking make the point without making a racist joke? Indian people don't naturally speak English, but we're in a country that speaks English. When I'm frustrated and I bring up an absolute truth and present it to people with a little smirk, that's described as racist. It's not racist. It's an observation. It's a very true observation. If you're not of English descent, you're in a parliament that speaks English, English may be your second language, yet that would be declared as racist in that same place using English words. Come on now. Let's fucking all just sort this out. Everybody's racist. Racism is like an actual instinctive human thing. It's like without racism, we wouldn't be here. There's an argument that says that like without racism, we wouldn't have evolved. If you think about it, it's the entire. It's like we can't be sitting at the pinnacle of civilization, which is a parliamentary house. That's why I said I'm having a corroboree. I'll start walking back. I'm retreating. If you're all going into this bullshit, I'm retreating back to fucking, tribal pagan animism. I'll just walk into the fucking mirage and disappear. But if we're going to play the civilization game, we have to understand that racism directly led to this current manifestation. Now it's going to be racism and racist words and techniques and things that's going to evolve us to the next level. When we look at the Ashes is racist. The Ashes cricket game, the rivalry between England and Australia, that's racist. A bunch of people from England, Scotland, Ireland, Wales, the whole fucking world were basically brought here by English people, then called Australians, then they called themselves Australian. Then there's a rivalry that's very heated. That's racism. But that's civilized racism that has been able and allowed to, decrease violence, lower the thing, and become conversational or become even better, symbolically displayed in a game of cricket, which is described as the gentleman's game. And this is why women shouldn't be in politics, which is sexist. Holy shit. These are just these are like little picket fences that the women have demanded be placed at the front of their houses. A picket fence doesn't stop a large man jumping over it and murdering you in your sleep. It's a veneer. It's just a little thing that makes you feel better. And more importantly than that, it makes everyone else know that you've got yourself inside a little picket fence. Yeah. Because you're better than all the other women. So the picket fence is the ultimate tool of colonization. Isn't it? Now, I instruct any of you to go and have a look at my mum's property because there, sure as hell, is a white picket fence out the front of it. Which wasn't even really an Australian thing. It was an Americanized fucking concept to encourage suburban living and a kind of elitist, feminist, suburban housewife cult that all takes place within white culture. I don't know how many picket fences there are in India or Pakistan or fucking Gaza. But all of these cultural elements can be wheeled out and used in the exact same way that Pauline Hanson did with that burqa. So yeah, I'll end on that note. I know that I fucking rattle on, but this is complicated. It's like, stop making it more. Fix the problems. That's what you're there for. You fix the problems, right? Which means, hey, blow the cobwebs and dust off the inbox of criticisms and suggestions. Oh, shit. Look, we found this pile that's been here for fucking 60 years of complaints. Most of the people that complained are now dead because of the abuse or the neglect that they were complaining about. And you're sitting there having a fashion fucking discussion or debate about fashion. Oh, fucking Jesus. This is exactly what the men about all those years ago warned us would happen if we let women in there. So, but get to work.